Machiavelli didn't teach people how to be evil. He taught them something far more unsettling: how to see clearly. In 16th century Florence, when the entire political landscape could shift overnight because one powerful family fell out of favor, a diplomat spent decades watching how rulers actually held power versus how they claimed to. He saw pious men destroy cities. He saw ruthless men build lasting peace. And the pattern, he noticed, had almost nothing to do with virtue or vice. It had everything to do with something nobody wanted to admit out loud. The ruler who controlled the story controlled the state. Florence in his time was a city of theatre. Every public act was a performance, every alliance a carefully maintained fiction, every ceremony a message aimed at a specific audience. And the rulers who lasted were not necessarily the strongest or the most virtuous. They were the ones who understood that what people believed about them mattered more than what was actually true about them. That sounds cynical. Sit with it before you decide it is. Because the same principle runs through every organization, every relationship, every career you've ever watched succeed or fail. The most competent person in the room doesn't always get the promotion. The best product doesn't always win the market. The candidate with the clearest ideas doesn't always win the election. Something else is operating alongside merit, and most people pretend not to notice it. What is that thing? Machiavelli had a name for it. He called it the ability to be both the lion and the fox, force and cunning. The lion fights what's in front of it. The fox sees the traps before it gets there. Most people are one or the other. The ones who last are both. He wrote The Prince in 1513 while essentially under house arrest. Having been imprisoned and tortured by the very Medici family, he was now trying to impress with the manuscript. Think about that for a second. A man who had just been broken by political power was now writing a guide to political power, hoping to use the guide to get back into the game. He wasn't theorizing from a distance. He was living the lesson. The book got him nowhere, at least not in his lifetime. The Medici ignored it. He died, never having regained real influence. But the text spread across Europe, was banned by the Catholic Church, and was reportedly kept in the private libraries of kings who publicly condemned it. That gap between what powerful people said about the book and what they actually did with it tells you almost everything you need to know about his central argument. Here's where it gets genuinely interesting. The core of what Machiavelli observed wasn't that leaders should lie. It's more subtle than that. He noticed that leaders who understood the relationship between perception and reality could shape events. Leaders who didn't were always reacting to a story someone else had written about them. He pointed to a ruler who lost everything not because he was weak in practice, but because he allowed himself to be seen as weak. The perception became the reality. Once enough people believed the state was unstable, it became unstable. Because belief is self-fulfilling at political scale. Allies withdrew. Enemies advanced. The thing people feared started happening precisely because they feared it. On the other side, he pointed to leaders who were genuinely ruthless but performed mercy at the exact right moment, publicly, visibly, in ways that got retold and remembered. One calculated act of clemency could undo years of harsh rule in the popular memory, not because the leader changed, because the story changed. He wasn't endorsing this. He was describing it. There's a difference, though almost nobody has ever given him credit for making it. And this is what he actually said, in plain language. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. That's not a celebration of deception. It's a warning about the gap between appearance and reality that every person in any position of influence has to navigate whether they want to or not. Pretending the gap doesn't exist doesn't make you more honest. It just makes you less effective and more vulnerable to whoever is willing to work with it. So how does this apply to you? Specifically, in a world where your reputation travels faster than you do, you are already managing a narrative. The question is whether you're doing it consciously or letting it happen to you by default. Every time you don't respond to a false characterization of your work, someone else's version of events fills the silence. Every time you deflect credit without also claiming it appropriately, other people's assessments of your contribution become the official record. Every time you let a conflict play out without any sense of how the story lands to everyone watching, you've handed the authorship of that story to someone else. Machiavelli would look at how most people handle their professional reputation and call it abdication. Not humility, abdication. Here's a concrete version of this. Your team delivers a project that succeeds. You know exactly what went wrong along the way, the compromises you had to make, the corners that got cut. Your instinct, if you're a thoughtful person, is to be honest about the complications when asked. And, in a private, trust-based conversation, you should be. But what Machiavelli understood is that public narrative and private truth operate by different rules. The public story of that project will be whatever story gets told most clearly and most often. If you let the messengers be the dominant version, that's what sticks. If you clearly articulate what you set out to do, what you achieved, and what you learned, that version can coexist with the complications without being consumed by them. That's not spin. That's authorship. There's a difference. The people who do this well aren't lying about their work. They're providing context, framing, and emphasis. They understand that any event is simultaneously a fact and a story, and the story is always up for negotiation. Letting someone else negotiate it on your behalf by default isn't noble, it's just passive. Now, the part Machiavelli would insist you understand. This only works when the underlying substance is real. A false narrative built on nothing collapses under pressure. He watched rulers destroy themselves by manufacturing reputations for qualities they didn't actually have. Because the moment of crisis always comes, and that moment reveals the substance beneath the story. His argument was never that perception could replace reality permanently. It was that reality without perception, management, is chronically undervalued, misread, and exploited by people who understand how stories work. The lion who never learned to be a fox gets caught in every trap. The fox who never learned to be a lion gets pushed around by anyone willing to show force. The combination of genuine capability and deliberate clarity about how that capability is communicated, that's what actually builds lasting influence. He died without the recognition he spent his life pursuing. His ideas outlived every person who dismissed him. There's something almost perfectly Machiavellian about that. He lost the game he was playing, and won a different, much longer one he didn't fully anticipate. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Very few see what you really are. The question is whether you're shaping the appearance, or just hoping the reality eventually speaks for itself. It usually doesn't. Not without help. Subscribe if this one made you think about how you're showing up. Next video goes deeper into where Machiavelli drew his own line.